When you ran off, I had to leave Lily alone. Lily?
Lily? He's a pluck of feathers.
Aye, get up. The black carriage is here.
Welcome, angels, amplifiers of light, or as I like to say, ampliphites. Ye who have invested in, supported, shared, viewed, in short, given birth and life to the light-amplifying film entertainment distributed by Angel Studios. You've supported The Chosen, Tuttle Twins, Freelancers, The Wingfeather Saga, Riot and the Dance, and Jungle Beat, among others. And by so doing, you've helped make the world a better, brighter, freer, funnier, more faithful, hopeful, loving place. Hats off to you, angels. If I had a hat, I'd take it off. To you or for you, or if you had a hat, maybe I'd take it from you. My name is Joel Ackerman. I'm a member of the human family, a consumer of entertainment, and also creative director at Angel Studios. And today, we have two very special guests who are going to help all of us better understand how Angel Studios is changing the entertainment industry. And make no mistake about it, folks, when you support Angel Studios, you're not just helping to create better content for yourself, your kids, your family. You're helping to change the very landscape of entertainment in the world as we know it. So with no further ado, let's learn how. Allow me to welcome my friends, two co-founders of Angel Studios, Idaho Farm Boys, brothers, one of whom is completely bald, Neil and Jeffrey Harmon. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, Joel.
So everyone here watching is a fan of one or many of the Angel productions, but they don't know who is behind this great enterprise and the many successful businesses you've built, others before this. So take me back to the very beginning. Where did this all start?
It's a good question.
How
far back? How far back?
Okay, so the universe was created. Then what? No. Let's start in Idaho. Okay, you were born in Idaho. I was also born in Idaho. As far as I know, anyone who has ever done anything significant in this world was born in Idaho, except maybe Jesus Christ, who they say was born in Bethlehem, which, I don't know, maybe that's in Idaho too. Folks, If you know anyone who's done anything significant who wasn't born in Idaho, put it in the comments. But you guys were born in Idaho.
Yeah.
Tell us about your upbringing.
So we had three TV stations.
Okay.
We had ABC,
NBC.
NBC, CBS, and then if you
Not you personally, but the state at large.
our area,
home.
Okay.
Declo, Idaho area.
Okay.
And population of Declos was, the sign would read about 250 at the time. I think it's up to 350 now.
Yeah.
Two new families.
It grew by 50%, I think, or something. Yeah. So, but the you could get a fourth station PBS if you took a metal hanger, hooked it to the antenna, and then hung it from the curtain rod.
Which was the extent of technology in Declo. I take it. But you guys, so you had very little exposure to entertainment at large, but you were entrepreneurs. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, so that started for me when I was 11. Well, before that, I was interested in just like money. Like
Who wouldn't be interested in money? If you're interested in money, put it in the comments. Oh, here's some pictures of the Harmons from their Idaho days. Who's this?
That's me.
There's Neil.
That's when my dad took me fishing the first time. That's my dad. And that's me right behind that goat.
So you can see, this is
that you?
essentially a
That's me, right
camping
in front of
trip. You guys essentially lived on like a...
That's
you know,
me.
there's a
That's
big-
me.
Your life was a 4-H activity, it looks like.
Pretty close.
Yeah, so this we played out in the mud. This is right outside our house. Take the hose, fill up our sprinklers, and fill up the dirt with as much water as you could.
Okay.
And then it became a play area.
So, okay, so, and this is what led you to believe...
And we made our own toys. There's a bow and arrow.
Yep.
So I can see why you were interested in money.
That's
because
me.
you
I
said,
made
we
that
need
bow.
something better than this.
Yeah, yeah.
Money
we
is our
grew
way
up. We grew
out.
up pretty poor. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pretty poor. We had ducks, geese.
We threw dirt clods at each other.
Yeah, yeah.
That's our family a little later.
All in denim. Okay, good.
Jeffrey's on the right.
I'm in the red tie on the right.
Yep. I'm in a blue shirt and a gray tie in the back.
Okay, so let's go back to your entrepreneurial, energy starting.
Okay. So about 11, I remember hoeing beets for a summer
Okay,
to save up enough money because the only business that I knew at the time was the dairy farm
okay.
or beets and potatoes, and I couldn't buy a field. So I thought, I can save up enough to buy a cow. And I researched what the cows were selling for. They were $150, and I worked all summer
To buy a baby cow.
to buy a baby heifer calf. And unfortunately, the price of calves went up by $25 at the end of the summer, and my dad gave me $25 to buy my first cow. And then I built this little plan where I had a piece of paper and I had researched what the mortality rate is of cows and what the chances are that they can have twins. And I had made this assumption that my calf was going to have twins, and then her calves were going to have twins.
So it didn't matter what you researched. You just bet on the impossible.
And it was like 60% heifers versus bulls.
Okay.
And her very first calf was just one bull. So anyway, that was my first wake-up call to assumptions versus reality.
So is this, in these ventures you had, Jeff, I know you have mentioned you sold potatoes, you dealt with bovine, is that a term that I can use? Is this where you started getting into advertising or learning that you have to advertise? Because that's where eventually I'd like to
Yeah.
talk about, is that you eventually build this hugely successful advertising agency called Harmon Brothers, obviously
Yeah.
years later, but...
So for me, the first was at 11 years old as well. Our dad would drive down to Utah to work,
Okay.
and figured Utah was far enough away. I don't even know who came up with the idea. Maybe it was my idea, maybe it was my parents' idea, but to go up to our grandpa's potato cellar, where they store potatoes year round,
Okay.
and then buy 600 pounds of potatoes from him, put them in garbage sacks, put them in my dad's Ford Taurus wagon, and drove down to Utah, and then I wrote up a script where I think the words were, "Hi, I'm Jeffrey Harmon. I'm Frank Harmon's grandson," because he lived here in Utah.
Okay.
"And I am selling fresh Idaho potatoes from my grandpa's farm in Idaho to pay for my schooling at a private school. Would you like to buy some?"
It's a good script.
Yeah,
I'd buy
11-year-old.
that.
11-year-old.
I'd read-line it.
So I was at 11 years old, which is crazy now. I look at my 10-year-old daughter, imagine her just sending her out alone in another state. and in another state to complete strangers knocking on doors saying this script, but I did it, and the first hour I sold $110 of potatoes, and I was like, oh, this is way better than pulling weeds for my neighbor.
Or hoeing beets.
Yeah, so you have these early experiences. How does this get you, years later, how does this inform your decisions from creating the ad agency to going into filtering and building VidAngel?
So Daniel,
Okay.
the brother between us, he's a director now,
Okay.
he would come with me to sell potatoes. And we bought together, we got a 15-passenger van that our uncle forced us to buy because he
You had a mean uncle.
Yeah, no.
Oh,
So
okay.
we were borrowing his vehicles off the farm and then driving them to Utah and putting huge amounts of miles on them and only paying for fuel. And so,
That's clearly that's.
so
keep
you
your
can see
costs
how I
down.
made $110 an hour is I didn't have to pay for any of the
You had
costs.
no expenses.
Yeah, no expenses. And they would just charge like 50 cents a box for these potatoes out of the cellar. So I'd go sell them for $20 a box. So it was a pretty good business because I was mooching off everybody else. But after we had sold a substantial amount of potatoes, meaning we were selling thousands and thousands of dollars, he just shows up with this big 15-passenger van. It is yellow. It was originally white. And it was used at the Kennecott copper mine, had 300,000 miles on it. He's like, I bought this at auction for $900. You're buying it from me, and you're not using my cars anymore. And so we paid him $900, and we owned a 15-passenger van as our first vehicle. I was 15, and Daniel was 17, I think.
Incredible.
Yeah. So then Daniel and I later, the skills of selling potatoes door to door, I think lent themselves to us being able to create ads around a company called Orabrush.
Right.
And
I'm familiar with it.
Yes, and so Joel used to be my roommate. I came and talked to you, so I'd like to hear your version.
No,
of
that's
this.
right. Well, like I said, folks, we go way back. I was
We were university roommates.
yeah, university roommates and
Marketing major,
film major.
film major.
And so yeah, like we did Orabrush, and then a couple years later,
So Joel directs and writes this script, or I think the first one you wrote it, Devin Graham directed it, right?
yes, correct.
And then it blows up on the internet. It's still rated as one of the top 10 ads for YouTube of all time, even though it's low budget and stuff. And,
Right.
And then we built an agency off of this concept. We did Poopery together.
That just reminds me. Joel and I went down to California and sold Orabrushes store to store. Do you remember that?
Yes, at Walmart. I remember it well. I remember well.
Orabrush is a tongue cleaner that gets rid of bad breath.
Yeah, it was the first experience that I felt like I would be more successful if I was blonde and blue-eyed. That was my takeaway from the Walmart selling experience.
So,
That's totally off topic, but I had to say that.
So
when
Joel's
here.
been intertwined. Your destiny.
Yes, our fates are very intertwined. I would
Yeah,
say.
and so Joel writes and directs Poopery, and that Poopery is what launches the ad agency, Harmon Brothers.
Yep.
And we get into doing poop commercials and what mattress
Squatty
commercials.
Potty.
So there's Squatty Potty. There's
Lumi deodorant, basically
Lumi
all
deodorant.
bodily functions were
Yeah.
covered.
Yeah, basically
books.
anything that's really, really hard to explain. I
Was our
remember
bread and butter.
Joseph Flaherty from Wired magazine tweeted out and said, "These guys are like the," he said, "the what was the guy from the, now it's blanking me, the name, the guy who invented infomercials.
Oh, I don't know the name either.
Yeah, normally, it'll come to me later. But
It's somebody who had figured out that if he did really great informational ads and showed them late at night and during the dead spots, that he could make a very successful business.
Yeah, and so Wired Magazine's like, these guys are they've reinvented the infomercial for the internet era.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's created an entire category of ads.
And you guys blew up doing that. Harmon Brothers is still, to this day, a very successful...
Yeah, to the point, I mean, Orabrush was the first company to make money on YouTube, and to the point that Google and YouTube invited us out to speak to everybody there, and they came out to our offices and they worked on their new ad platform and how it would work, the skippable ad.
We came up with that with them. We said, we want an ad that's not 15 seconds, not 30 seconds, not 1 minute. We want ads that can go as long as we can hold the audience's attention. So give us 5 seconds at the beginning to hook them, and then let them skip if we can't keep their attention.
And then they offered us half of the shares of Google for that idea.
If only that were true. So you've been innovating in the entertainment space since then, and when did you start going, we want to move from advertising to entertainment in the VidAngel? When, like,
so that idea started in 2012. It was around the Orabrush time frame, and I remember there were 4 brothers, or they were there. I'm not exactly. I know Dang was there, and you and I were there.
Yep.
But we were talking, and YouTube had just released a new feature where you could manipulate the YouTube player with programming.
okay.
And this was cool, and I was talking about it, and we were sharing ideas, and we started talking about why hasn't there been a way to skip over streaming content, like bad scenes, so that you can enjoy the movie, like the old edited films that just disappeared.
Automatic or airplane films.
Yeah,
Sure.
airplane films. Why couldn't you do that in streaming media? So I thought, I went home and I coded up a little program on my favorite movie, Cinderella Man, or one of my favorite movies, and then Jeffrey helped me once I built a tool for it, and we made this Cinderella Man that my 9-year-old son could watch, and then he wouldn't repeat the bad language to his younger sisters. About a year after, so it was just an idea then, we were just tinkering around. About a year later...
we called it Clean Tube.
Yeah, that's right.
At the beginning, that's what the name was.
Clean Tube.
Yeah.
Clean Tube.
VidAngel is better. It's a good change.
So about a year later, Google released this little device that plugged in the back of a big screen TV.
Okay.
That would let you...
Called Chromecast.
Yeah, called Chromecast and SD.
Everybody knows what that device is, so
Yeah.
you can just say that. This Chromecast, this little device that you can plug into the... Sorry, go ahead.
Surprisingly, people still don't know what Chromecast is.
Okay.
So there's an SDK on the Chromecast, so you could program it.
Okay.
And so we said, hey, maybe we should launch a business. We did some research, found out other people wanted the same thing, and we launched a company based off of this.
And there were these new devices that had screens on them you could hold in your hand. Called iPhones.
Right. So this seems to be a theme with you guys. This disruptive kind of ideas and serving unserved markets. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. So the cool thing about the theory of disruption by Clayton Christensen is that the best way to enter a market, there's 2 ways to enter a market. One is to have tons of capital and do something 10 times as well as the competitors.
Okay.
The other is to go into a market and serve those who aren't being served. So the Sony Walkman, at the time when it came out, there were big radios that were awesome. And then the Walkman was this tinny sounding radio, but it just so happened that teenagers couldn't afford radios, and this filled their need. And so there was a brand new market, and then Sony got their product better and better and better, and they moved up through the market. Same thing happened with VidAngel, is that there was a group of people who, like our parents, wouldn't let us watch PG-13 movies at our house.
Sure.
And so we couldn't, there was very few
If you wanted
options.
to watch PG-13 movies, you needed to be disowned. But we had to, you couldn't watch them at home.
Sure.
Okay, anyway, so VidAngel allowed us to serve the people who wanted to watch really high quality stories, but they didn't want to watch, or they wanted to listen to bad words or.
And I think everyone's experienced that. In fact, if you want to put in the comments the TV or movie that you would want to have filtered, or maybe your favorite show that you do filter so your family can enjoy it, we'd love to see the comments. So okay, so you do this. You know, you invented the skippable ad.
Mm-hmm.
You invent this new way of filtering content so people can watch the shows that they love the messages of maybe, but they don't love all the words or bad parts. How did you make this transition from VidAngel now to distributing
So that was the
content?
goal the whole time. Neil had come to me at the beginning and said, Jeff, if we create a filtering company, that's what, it's not Instagram filters, but it's,
Right.
at the time, that's the only thing filtering meant.
Yeah.
And so if we create a filtering company that skips, it's an automatic remote and skips the language, there's a huge market in the United States that wants this. And if we do it well, we'll build an audience that we can then create original content for this audience, and we can actually create the movies that we want to be made rather than just taking the bad stuff or the unacceptable scenes out of the movies or words out of the movies that we already watch. And that's when I said, Neil, I want to do this. This sounds great. But similar to, I think there's some parallels here to like Reed Hastings and Netflix and the way that the theory of disruption works. Netflix, he called it Netflix because he planned on streaming movies over Netflix. But at the time, there was only 56K modems. So instead of just going straight to streaming, which it wasn't able to, just like Sony Walkman, he comes out with this other product where he says you can just get DVDs at your home, and he focuses on this little tiny group of people who are movie buffs who want to watch old library stuff, like the backlog.
Right.
Because you can't get that at Blockbuster,
Right.
right? And there's no way to get it unless you order them on eBay or something. And so this DVDs by mail system comes out, and he says, if I follow Moore's law, which says every 18 months the speed of the internet speeds will double every 18 months, by 2012, I'll be able to stream movies. And I think it came out a little bit sooner than that, but he built a totally different business to get, that had a kind of a relationship, but to get to the streaming business. We were trying to do the same thing, where you build a business on people who want to filter, and eventually you transition into an original content streaming business.
So I do see the parallels there, but as I understand it, there's one crucial difference, which was you were a little bit forced ahead of schedule because of a lawsuit from a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
that's correct.
what happened there? So Disney sues you. What was that all about? Why did they sue you?
So the filtering company, VidAngel, was actually a start and stop business for us. Like that Chromecast stopped working. We asked to buy Chromecast from Google. They said, wait until we launch, and when they launched, they pulled the tech.
Buy it wholesale.
Yeah, to buy a wholesale,
Okay.
and then sell them, and they pulled the tech that made it work. We later found out that the studios contracts wouldn't let them do it, and then we tried a YouTube ad. We tried partnering with Google Play, who had the licensing contracts, and every time the studios ended up being the stumbling block. And the fourth business that we tried was to buy millions of dollars of DVDs and Blu-rays and then filter those online to people. And that business we built with a Hollywood attorney who was in the business for 30 years and had worked for the Oscars and for Disney and for Warner Brothers. And he said, there's a law, Family Movie Act. The way I read this law, you can operate this business. Let's write the studios and ask for their feedback, which we did twice, and they didn't give us any feedback. And then Disney, once we were successful, And interestingly, that we had asked our customers whether they wanted to invest in the company, and 2 weeks after we asked that question, Disney sued us. About a year after we launched the business and had asked for their feedback.
So help me draw the connection there. If it's just after you ask them to invest in the business, is that the thing that?
We think that's what triggered the lawsuit.
Ah,
And so and then they did what's called a preliminary injunction filing, and that would shut down our business. But they set it way out, hoping that we wouldn't raise money. Okay. But in that interim, people started asking us, "Hey, we want you guys to make it. Can we donate?" And we said, "Sure." And we got like 70,000 people who donated. But then we had learned about crowdfunding, and we made a crowdfunding round live, and we said, we just need $5 million to fight this lawsuit. And those customers invested over $10 million in 5 days. So we now had $5 million to fight the lawsuit and $5 million to follow our original dream of starting a studio.
and the difference is, correct me if I'm wrong, was that they, on the round of investment, they're getting paid. They're investing in the company. So
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And to me, that's that's the seed of this new innovative model, right? Which is that it's not just, hey, crowdfund this show and get a T-shirt or help us stay alive by
If the show's successful.
donating, but that you actually own a piece, and if the show's successful,
That's the model that we pioneered, yeah. And Daniel, the middle brother between us, calls me the day after we closed.
Me too,
Yeah, he calls and just says, "Jeff, do you realize that we can potentially crowdfund really big budget movies with this model and actually compete with the big studios without having a huge subscription base?"
so you're in the midst of your lawsuit with Disney. You're already opening up your mind of competing with these studios on a bigger stage, not just
Yeah.
the legal stage. A bigger
So
stage.
the idea was sprung then, and then like December 13th, or December 12th, we got the
This is just a month after we'd crowdfunded, right?
Yeah, it was the month after we crowdfunded, we got the injunction. And that following
They shut us
night,
down. Injunction means they shut down the company.
Yeah.
The judge did.
Yeah, the judge in California. And so the following night, we announced Angel Studios that night, and Dry Bar Comedy. And we launched because we said, we're not going to be able to operate the filtering business moving forward, so
Right.
there's never going to be another chance. We didn't reach the numbers that we wanted to before launching the original content business, but we said we're not going to have another chance.
Okay, so now you shift out of necessity
Yeah.
to creating content. You start, like you say, with Dry Bar, which Dry Bar, if you haven't watched it, folks, look up Dry Bar Comedy on YouTube.
Or in the Angel app.
Or in the Angel app. In fact, so millions of people watch Dry Bar Comedy.
Yeah.
Millions of people have watched.
It's had 4.1 billion views, Dry Bar Comedy has.
Yeah, 4.1 billion views.
Yeah.
Chosen is approaching 500 million views. And yet, so many people don't know they can watch this content for free on the Angel app. Download the Angel app wherever you get your apps and start enjoying all these shows and more. And by the way, if you haven't watched Dry Bar Comedy, it's very funny. And if you have any of your own clean jokes and would like to share them on today's live stream, leave it in the comments. But so Dry Bar, you get all these comics who come in and do clean comedy, and you innovate on how they're compensated, right? Based on
Yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't want to, so we pitched this idea to one of our board members who had built a clean comedy club before, where he would bring in comedians and say, "You just be clean because my audience wants clean, that's my brand."
Sure.
And he loved the idea, but he said, "How are you guys going to get comedians to actually obey?" Because he's like, I'd build an audience locally, and then about once a month a comic would come in, and no matter what I said, they'd get up and do whatever they want, and then my audience would get so angry at me, send me hate mail, and never come back because it reflected on my brand. And he's like, "You guys are going to have this kind of problem. And so we explained, we said, look, let's just hook the comedians to the filtering, and if they don't get filtered as much, we'll pay them more, so that they have to answer to the crowd. They have to answer to their viewers.
Okay.
And let's also have them rate them inside of the live screening. So you bring in the family audience, and then they rate them right after watching the show.
And they know that they're the gatekeepers.
They're the gatekeepers.
So if a comedian goes off, then they can say, oh, I rate that one poorly, and then that comedian never gets published.
So this is like an early version of what's happening now with all of our content. This is like the first iteration.
Is this what inspired? So let's talk about how that shift happened, because you guys are serial innovators apparently, because this is a innovative way of compensating comics.
Yeah.
Were the comics on board with that, or?
Yeah. The first ones was like pulling teeth. It was like, I went and got the first few. I had to pay them a lot, too much money, and also our board member got a couple of comics, but we come in and we say, okay, we're going to pay you a minimum amount to do your show, and then you can make, once your show's paid off, you can make money eternally, like in perpetuity, on your special. And the first few, they came in, it was almost like a favor. They were just like...
You remember that Hollywood attorney that helped us during the lawsuit?
Yes.
He said when he saw our dry bar contracts, he said, you intend to pay these comedians, don't you? He's like,
He
I can
wrote the
count on
contract.
one hand the people in Hollywood who have actually gotten like a back-end check.
Yeah, he's like, I'm used to writing contracts that make sure you never have to pay. And he's like, and you're wanting me to write a contract that actually pays them.
Yeah.
And today, over half of the dry bar comedians are making royalty checks. Over 50%.
And some of them had full-time income during COVID.
some of them make
because
over
their,
6 figures in a year.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So it's like a full-on job, passive income, full-on job.
And just by paying people, you incentivize them. Who knew?
Yeah. In fact, I knew we had it right when one comedian from LA comes and he gets on stage, and I'm not going to use his name because I haven't asked him, but he gets on stage and during his set, he accidentally drops the Lord's name in vain.
Okay.
Which is a big one. We'd say this is one of the ones that this audience,
People like to skip.
Yeah, they like to skip. And he calls me on the phone, and he says, I just watched a screener of my special, and I swore on accident once. I dropped a word I did not even know I did. Will you please just edit it out?
Nice.
He's like, that's not my intention. I didn't mean to offend it. I don't want the filters. Just edit out that word. And I was like, the artist is telling me to cut out content that isn't appropriate.
And not just any artist, a comedian,
Yeah,
right?
a
Comedians are known for pushing the boundaries.
And we're like, okay, we don't have to police these guys. They'll
Yeah.
police themselves. And for the most part, that's true. And we've filmed over 500 specials now. And it's the largest library of clean stand-up comedy in the world. Or
Amazing.
Safe. We use the word safe stand-up.
Amazing.
Meaning,
Funny for everyone.
yeah, it's funny for everyone.
Funny for everyone. Don't forget to download the app, check this stuff out. Let's talk about The Chosen, because that came next, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it did.
And most people, if they're tuning in, probably familiar with The Chosen. Highly, like I said, almost 500 million views, viewed by millions and millions of people, financially successful. What I want to ask you about is, what's the real life impact of The Chosen? What are the stories you hear, the things people tell you about how The Chosen affects them? And if you're watching, feel free to share your own experience in the comments. But
Two come to mind for me.
Go ahead.
One is my teenage daughter was going through a stage when she was frustrated with church and anything to do with church. And we had watched The Chosen together as a family, and she didn't come. But she went out. We have this theater out on our porch, or the screen, and she went out and watched episode 3 of season 1 of The Chosen with the children. And she watched it on her own, and then she came in afterwards, and she had that like shine in her eyes, and she said, "Dad, do you think Jesus might be that way?" Just in a hopeful voice. And boy, when she said that, it was just like, oh, this was all worth it to me. Yeah, so the other story that comes to mind is I was at the grocery store, And an old friend of my my wife's came up to me in the grocery store, and she just had tears coming out of her eyes because she said her 21-year-old daughter that they had binged The Chosen together, and she had been so worried about her spiritual future, and she just almost couldn't even speak. Anyway, those are the kinds of things that are happening, and they're happening. You know, the more we hear about them, the more we know that this is happening everywhere.
Thousands and thousands of letters.
And what, when you hear these kind of stories and you think that this kind of impact is being felt, if there's people who are writing you letters, which by the way, there's email and other ways of getting.
We have a pile of letters.
Yeah, I've seen them come into the office. They come into the office all the time, and it really is incredible to see like who's writing these letters.
Here is $15 from some lady.
Yeah.
It's like, will you please pay
Send
this
us
forward to the Chosen?
It really is incredible when you see that this is, and you know that for every person who's sending a letter, there's 100 people who are feeling it but too busy to send a letter, right? What do you think about, like, I'm always in shock when there's all these Christians who are obviously very interested in this kind of content all over the world, and yet Hollywood would never have greenlighted this project. They didn't support Passion of the Christ, these type of projects. Why is that? Do you know?
There's a book that I think that has had a huge impact on the foundation of this company and all the companies we've built. It's called The User Method by Schwarten. And he talks about how he does the research, and the vast majority of multi-billion-dollar unicorn companies is what they're called. Anything that's worth over $1 billion is a unicorn.
Okay.
The vast majority of these billion-dollar companies are built by people just trying to solve their own problems. So like the Airbnb guys, they couldn't pay rent, and there was a convention nearby, and they put up a website and they said, rent these air mattresses on our floor and you can stay at the conference. And then they built a business around people renting their apartments with air mattresses on the floor around conferences around the country. And that's the beginning of Airbnb, the air mattress bed and breakfast.
Right, okay.
And now it's a totally different thing today, but that's how they started. Steve Wozniak, founder of Apple with Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak was just trying to build a computer that he liked because he thought they all sucked.
Okay.
He thought all the other computers suck, so I'm going to build one that actually like has this specific like configuration that makes it more efficient, and he had these different ideas. And
he needed a computer that had a little picture of an apple on it.
That's it. But this happens over and over again, and so if Hollywood has no use case because they live in their own bubble. LA is a bubble. There's no question about it.
Right. I've lived there.
Yeah. It's like, Pete, when you're there and you spend any significant amount of time and you're from anywhere else in the country, you're like, these people are in a bubble. They're like, it's like they don't even,
like the ones
I can't comprehend these people.
Like the ones in the Phantom Menace under the water. They're in that kind of, in fact, a lot of them remind me of Jar Jar Binks. So you can imagine how annoying it is to live in LA. No, hey folks, if you're from LA, leave in the comments why you love LA, because we're still looking for a reason.
So anyway, this book, The User Method, goes through and explains that if you just make a product that serves your need, you know, Orabrush was created by an 70-year-old inventor who needed to solve the problem of bad breath because he was serving as a missionary in the Philippines. And the mission, the people that were on the mission with him preaching the gospel had horrible breath, and he was like,
and they're offending people they were teaching.
He's like, we're offending people, and so he starts researching, and he figures out that if you clean off your tongue, it gets rid of bad breath. So he just solves his own problem, and then builds a $10 million business off of that problem.
Incredible.
And so, User Method, if they don't have a use, at least a perceived use, for shows about Jesus Christ or shows that are safe for families, or comedy that you can listen to while your kids are in the room.
So because they don't care about it.
It's because they don't care.
Well, I mean, when I'm going down the streets of LA, I see dogs, people walking dogs, and you just don't see children. And,
Right.
There's no kids, right? Or very few.
Well, and that's very interesting, yeah. And it goes back to what you were just talking about with underserved markets, right?
Yeah, somebody asked me, there's a venture fund called GigaFund, which is invested in I think 18 companies. They've invested in SpaceX. They're one of the biggest investors in SpaceX. Boring Company, AI companies. They just invested in Angel Studios recently, and they only invest in stuff they think are going to change the world. But one of them asked me, why did you pick a dry bar comedy and a show about Jesus? And I said, the user method. I pick stuff that I like.
Right.
And I assume that if I like it and my family's going to like it, that there's probably a lot of other people in the world that are hungry for the same thing I'm hungry for. There's probably a ton of other people who grew up on farms in Idaho selling potatoes. No, they're not the exact same as me, but they want the same things.
Right. So I think this gets to the truly, in my opinion, maybe the biggest innovation that you've done with Angel Studios that I do think will change, which is you've systematized this idea of user method, right? In that you, instead of, in fact, we have a little clip that kind of goes over a little bit the model of Angel, where it's not executives deciding what gets made, but it's the crowd. Let's watch this clip.
Take your beautiful idea to Hollywood, where its fate will be decided by just a few executives who try to guess what the audience will like. Or you can take your idea to Angel, where the merit of your film is judged by the audience itself, a panel of thousands of real people who vote on whether they want your beautiful idea made into a beautiful movie.
That is, no Hollywood executive would go, let's just let the people decide. And I compare what you're doing with Angel Studios often to the American Revolution, because I compare almost everything to the American Revolution, including breakfast cereal. But you guys are these little measly colonies taking on this empire, and then you want to democratize who gets to decide what projects get made. Tell us about that process and why you do it the way you do it.
Well, one of the reasons we do it the way we do it is because our mom used to read us books about Walt Disney and Roy Disney, and we learned that these Disney brothers, what they were like. They were the son of a preacher, the sons of a preacher, and they loved media and entertainment, and they made this magical company that is beloved across the world. And then we saw this terrible lawsuit and some of the things that company has become, and we decided, you know what? It doesn't matter how good Walt and Roy ever were. If it was up to them at one point, it's going to be up to those who follow them. And so we said, we have got to somehow make a way that this company still does what we want it to for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And so some of the best things that we've thought of to do that are, one, is that we shouldn't, when we first started becoming successful, people were constantly trying to brown nose me and talk to me, and actresses would come up. But once we publicized this system more, where we're telling that we don't make these decisions, we explain it to them. We don't make these decisions. You don't come talk to me. It doesn't matter that I'm the CEO of the company. I have no power on getting a piece of content onto angel.com.
So what is the system? It's not just executives or a small board. Tell us about the system for those of.
Okay. So what we do is we have what we call a film jury. There's 55,000 people who have invested in different projects.
To date.
And ever increasing.
It's ever increasing, yeah. It will, in 5 years, it'll be millions of people. We call these people the jury. These are people that get every once in a while they get an email that says, hey, you've been selected to be on the film jury. Every single week we receive 8 to 10 different submissions, which we call torches. They're 5 to 20-minute short films or like pieces of a pilot of a series. and they've created a piece of content that helps people understand what it is what they're making. And we take the term as torch from the Statue of Liberty.
Which we'll talk about later.
Yes. Okay, so we'll get back to that. So, but these little short projects get submitted, and then they go out to the jury. The jury watches the project, and then they get asked 2 questions. He asked, number 1, how would you feel if this was never turned into a series? And then they can answer very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. And then number 2, we ask, does this amplify light? And by amplifying light, we use Philippians 4:8, which is whatever is true, just, honorable, noble, praiseworthy.
Yeah.
Yep. And so they take that, and these 55,000 investors are from all over the world. Most of them are in the U.S., but they're from all over the world. And then we send it out to them, and they come back with they just watch. That's all they get to do is they get to watch this torch. They get to watch 5 to 20-minute clip of a show, and then they rank it, and they say, I think this should exist. I don't think it should exist. This amplifies light. It follows the brand, or it doesn't. And so when you get thousands of people from all over the world coming in with diverse different points of view, all making answering the same question, eventually the aggregate of that group starts making very good decisions. And so 95% of the projects that get submitted can't pass the jury. The jury's too strict.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And
so
then those 5% that make it have to go before the whole audience, and then they get greenlit by the audience funding their show.
Yeah, they go crowdfund it and sell off equity in their company.
Which helps mitigate risks and make sure there's an audience, because if people want the show enough, they'll pay for it, right?
That's right.
And
That's
the creator
right.
knows now that if they don't get greenlit, then they're like, oh, I don't spend my time making this show. I'm going to make something
That
else.
no one
because-
wants to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think that they're like, no way, the crowd's going to do a good job, right? They're like, somebody who actually knows something about media is going to understand who the audience is, and we're just saying user method plus lots of people works. And an example of that, there's a book called The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki, I think that's how you say his name. I read the book, I didn't say his name.
You didn't meet the man.
Yeah. And so he writes this book that's a couple decades old, but at the very opening of the book, he talks about James Francis, I think is his name, James Francis. And he is a statistician in 1906. And he was on a quest to prove to the world statistically that the average person couldn't guide humanity.
The elite were the
The
ones.
elites have to guide humanity.
Okay.
And so as part of his quest, he shows up at a county fair, and he sees this ox that they're doing a measuring, like you put in a paper in a raffle, and you say, this is how much I think the ox weighs.
Okay.
And if you guess the right weight, or the closest weight, you start winning prizes in the raffle. He takes the 800 different responses to how much the ox weighs, he tabulates them, and he finds out it was 1,197 pounds is what they guessed. The ox weighed 1,198 pounds. It was 1 pound off. And he's like, the average guess was closer than any individual. Especially, these are all farmers. They know how much, they have a pretty good idea of how much an ox weighs, so there's experts in the crowd. And he wrote down, this doesn't lend itself very well to my theories. I'm paraphrasing.
1 pound off.
Yeah. And so then another example would be who wants to be a millionaire?
Okay.
Statistically, every single week for years and years, and I think this show still runs, right? I don't know if it still runs, but it went all over the world, and you have lifelines, and the first lifeline is you can ask a friend, so you ask an expert, call an expert. Second one is remove 2 of the 4 questions and have a 50-50 guess. And the third one is ask the audience. Ask the audience would get the answer right 91% of the time. It trumped everything. It beat the experts and the statistical 50-50 thing every time.
Wow.
It's consistently, every single week in, week out, you see it beat it. And the crowd understands, they make good decisions. And then a third example is there was this submarine called the Scorpio that in 1968, I think, it sunk. And the US Navy couldn't figure out, it was a 20-mile circle where this had gone out of communication, and they said there's somewhere in this 20-mile circle in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
And so they take all the data points they have and they put it out to the broad Navy and ask anybody who can submit where you think it sunk based on this information. 5 months later, they took and aggregated the guesses, and they found the spot that everybody was kind of coalescing around. And it looked like they said to the experts, it looked like a random guess. It was 500 yards away from the actual submarine.
Wow.
And
with the scale of what the area they were looking at was highly precise.
yeah, and they said it was so far off from any expert's guess, but the crowd did a better job. And so, they give, I mean, the book just gives example after example of like presidential elections, the betting markets do better jobs than the pollsters. There's just like, but the crowd, when the conditions are set up properly, the crowd, the viewers, the aggregate intelligence of everybody can make a better decision, especially on very, very complex things.
As long as the crowd needs to be diverse, they need to make decisions independent of each other.
Right.
There can't be groupthink.
You have to have a system that aggregates it. You have to have a trust network.
Yep.
And so what we're trying to build with the jury is a system, because film is complex. Experts go and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build something like this new Toy Story, but Lightyear, right?
Right.
Lightyear. Flops. Just absolute flop. Those are experts. That's the experts saying, this show will do well. But if you give it to the crowd, our guess is that rather than 80% of projects failing out of Hollywood, that we're gonna beat that by a significant amount. This is our bet.
Sure.
By using a jury system, and as the jury gets bigger and we get more diversity and more people speaking into it, the more accurate it's gonna get.
Amazing. And what I love about it, and I'm sure our viewers, is that they get to have some say in what gets made too, right?
That's right.
It's not just throwing crap against the wall and see what sticks. They get to say, I'd really like to see that. And if there's enough other people who do, then they'll get there.
They are the say.
Yeah, they are the say.
Yep.
Exactly. So let me ask you this question. People have seen The Chosen. We now have Tuttle Twins rolling out. Right in the Dance is going to be coming out. The Wing Feather Saga this winter. All these shows that amplify light, that make people laugh. Freelancers is just a comedy show that benefit people's spiritual lives. Perish a thought, but what happens to these shows without Angel Studios?
That's a hard question.
I've often, I got asked to speak at Google once about advertising. And I went and I put up a picture and I just said, and I'm sure I didn't come up with this, but content is king, distribution is queen, and she wears the pants. So without Angel Studios, then they're just kind of left to find, we're the distributor. We're the ones trying to get, I mean, we reached billions of people with these different ads. We scaled up Dry Bar Comedy. We've scaled up The Chosen. And so I think the answer would be some of them would succeed because the Hollywood studios would grab them, right? And some of them just would never have a chance because they don't have a good distribution path.
And what's amazing to me is The Chosen, which is to date your biggest hit, right? That's probably one of the ones that wouldn't have got made. Dallas went all over trying to get it made in Hollywood, out of Hollywood, and didn't really have success, right?
Yeah. He, I said recently in a Babylon Bee interview that I think when Dallas said yes, I was like, well, I'm either a really good salesman from my potato days, or he's desperate, or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because they're trying to convince him to launch our The Chosen was meant to be, when we talked to Dallas, it was like, can you and Amanda build our
flagship
series
for Angel Studios.
For Angel Studios, yeah.
Wow. Great. And so I think you're right. I think without these, they don't exist. If you're at home, download the app so you can check out this content and look at the upcoming potential projects. You can look at expressing interest. If you would be interested in investing, you can look at projects that are actively crowdfunding. You can look at investing in them. And anyone who invests automatically becomes a member of the jury and gets to...
Well, they have the option to be a member of the jury.
Or they get to have the option to be a member of the jury and vote on that. It's just occurred to me that there are 2 of you and only 1 of me. And I'm scrappy, but you could probably beat me up. So I brought in a bodyguard, just for protection for the remainder of the interview. I hope you don't mind that. He don't mind him at all.
There was no dress rehearsal here, folks. We do not know what's coming.
Yeah. So when you talk to me now about when you the rebrand and where if you look at Angel Studios' slate, there is you see the robes of the Statue of Liberty. You see it here, the robes of the Statue of Liberty behind. You see the spotlight forms the crown of the Statue of Liberty. So the Statue of Liberty is very present in your branding. And by the way, you're probably good to go here. Thank you.
Who do I invoice?
These guys.
Okay. I can keep the shirt.
Yeah, you can keep the shirt. But no, talk to me about like what the statue. Why is this significant in your story?
So we were trying to figure out what to brand the company because after picking VidAngel as a name, at the ad agency we developed what we call the branding stress test. And VidAngel fails the stress test because people have a hard time the way that the words, it doesn't have a good mouthfeel and it's hard to hear. You say, I work at VidAngel, and everybody would say, what? Right. Like Video Angel, and they'd be like, oh, okay. And it always took 2 or 3 times to get it. And so in the stress test, you learn how well it can travel word of mouth. And so once we learned that, we started looking for a new name.
Okay.
And this was a multi-year process of trying to figure out what that name would be. And my wife is from Brazil, and we were traveling through New York City, just landed, we're there for a few hours. And I said, what do you want to do? And she said, let's go see the Statue of Liberty. I want to see the Statue of Liberty. I was like, okay, that'll probably take like an hour or 2. Stop there. 8 hours later, we're leaving. I was blown away. But I realized that there was this concept from the guy who created the Statue of Liberty. His name's Frederick Bartholdi. And he had this dream of creating the biggest piece of art in the world around the biggest idea in the world. And he thought maybe the Suez Canal is the biggest idea in the world. And he went and pitched them and they said no. And he was just getting knocked down all the time. So he couldn't get governments to fund it, couldn't get the right people to fund it. And so but then he traveled to the United States and he was so blown away by the idea of America that he came back and said, I'm going to build the Statue of Liberty around this concept of freedom. And couldn't get the money raised, but he was able to raise enough to build just the hand and a torch. So you have the torch. And he built that, set it up in Paris, and started crowdfunding. And he would get people to come. He had a black and white camera. He'd take pictures of them. They'd donate to it, and he'd give them like souvenir napkin rings and different items. But it was like a Kickstarter. And he spent 10 years building a movement around this torch to get enough money, $14 million in a day's money. Maybe it's probably more than that now. That was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
I got that calculation. It's been a lot of inflation. But
20 million now.
yeah, it might be a little bit more.
30.
Yeah, I don't think it's anyway, but he spent a decade getting the money, and then he built the Statue of Liberty. And people don't realize it was the French people who gave us the Statue of Liberty as Americans. And so taking that concept, the first thing, as we say, is you have to bring a torch. You have to build part of your show in order to bring it to Angel Studios. You got to show that you got the chomps to put together and build the torch. Then you can take it and see if you can build a movement around that torch to fund your entire series. And so that's the first thing. They have to bring a 5 to 10 minute film. But then we built the logo completely around the concept as a derivative of the ideas around the Statue of Liberty. So when you watch the logo, the background of the logo is the robes of the Statue of Liberty, and it's copper oxide behind it. And then in front, it's the copper foil. So it's both are coppers. And then you have movie spotlights landing at the end, where the negative space on the movie spotlights is the shape of the kind of the sunbeams coming out of the statue.
Yes.
And then the shape of the logo is the crown.
Right.
And so, and then there's a deeper meaning even, and on top of that, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We see Angel Studios, if we're successful in what we do, and it's already happening, as the place for the outcasts of Hollywood to come and assemble and build something new.
Tricia and I were just in New York last week, and right off the statue, there's a museum, and the original torch is in this museum. It's not up on the top, and it's made out of copper. The one on the top now is covered in gold, and looks really, really nice now that this symbol has become so powerful. And I thought, that's a fitting analogy as well, because a lot of these creators, you'll see the torches, and they're just a little bit of the vision of what it'll be. Most of these torches won't actually be the final product.
Right.
Once they have a crowd supporting them, then they'll be able to do a far better job.
Right. It's a seed of the idea.
Yeah, if you watch the original Shepherd show, the storytelling's great. The quality, I mean, they made it for $85,000, I think, is the budget that they had on a little farm in Illinois. And like you see the outside of the stable, and it just looks like a modern farm door. Like it's not super old, but they just told a great story with the resources they had. Dallas did, and that was enough to build a community. To now build something that's, millions
Hugely
and tens of
successful.
millions of dollars per season.
Yeah, I think you and Dallas, these creators, are to be congratulated on the huge successes and building something that the people can be involved in, can benefit from on a personal level, on a gut meaningful level, and also on a financial level. And just to express celebrate your success. I have these. I know none of us smoke, but if you'd like to, these are just a little something that you could enjoy, a wafer cookie that resembles a cigar, but is much more delicious, in my humble but most correct opinion. As we look forward, do you see the entertainment industry already reacting in any ways to what you're doing? Or are you still flying under the radar?
Industry. I still think we're in the ignore stage. When Gandhi said that they first ignore you, and then they mock you, and then they
Fight you.
and then they fight you, and then you win. I think we're probably still in that ignore stage.
So maybe some lawsuits to come still.
Hope not.
We've learned how to fight them, I guess.
Okay, so what are you most excited? I want to end with this last question. What are you most excited about coming down the road for Angel Studios? And you can each answer if you'd like to. It could be a specific project that's in the testing the waters phase or crowdfunding, or it could be a kind of company level change, another innovation.
We want more people to be able to be involved in the jury. To be able to just like see all these crazy projects coming in. Mm-hmm. And you have to sift through a lot of garbage, but it's actually kind of fun. And I think as we build that system out to where more people can be involved, that will be I'm pretty excited about that.
The first time that I reviewed the jury process, there was like 1 or 2 in the batch that were interesting, and the rest I was kind of gritting my way through. I just participated in the jury yesterday, and I think I reviewed 10 or 15 projects, and over half of them were compelling. Now, I don't know that they'll pass the jury.
He comes up to Carlos, who runs the jury system, and he's like, man, so many of those were good. And Carlos is like, there'll probably be one that passes.
So still, but the quality, in other words, the
Quality's
quality of content that you're getting is more attention. And I do think, this is from my insider knowledge, you're already getting, maybe that the industry executive levels, you're not getting interest, but I know you're getting levels or interest from actors,
Yes.
writers who are seeing that your Angel is possibly the wave of the future.
So that's what has surprised me the most over the last few years. I thought when we started that we would be getting
Independents.
independent filmmakers coming to us who have never had a real shot. Almost all of the filmmakers that we're talking to seriously are veterans from Hollywood who have already had success, and but they just align with our principles better, and they're sick of the system. And so you've got, the guys who are making David, they've done tons of animation for Disney and
Pixar.
And, they're constantly an offloader for different projects. And you've got the guys who are building this Luso project, which is on the founding of America, which I'm very excited about. Because we would love to see a founding of America universe similar to building a chosen
And this has
Bible
multiple
universe.
players from Marvel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and
Yes,
who
these are
have-
veteran filmmakers, and across the board, the vast majority are veterans that understand the models, and they know what we're doing is making a difference, versus the independent filmmakers are like, oh, I still want to be in Hollywood. They can't give up that vision yet, quite yet.
The key word there, folks, is making a difference. And if you want to make a difference, have your own voice heard, download the Angel app. You can also follow us on our social media. We have we don't yet have TikTok. Stay tuned. But we have YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Follow all the latest and greatest news. Check out this content. We're going to close with a video that kind of goes over why Angel is changing the entertainment world and a sneak peek into some of the projects coming this and next year. Stay tuned for that. It's about 3 minutes. Thank you, Neil and Jeff, so much for spending this time with us, for exposing so much of what Angel Studios is doing. I'm Joel Ackerman. Don't say I didn't warn you. Thanks.
But this is different. Get used to different.
Hollywood will never make this, so we're crowdfunding it without them.
We don't have a big studio or network writing us a big check. We're doing everything outside the system.
It's never been more important to have some family-friendly comedy in the world, and paying it forward makes it get to lots of new people.
And the cool thing about this is that they're even giving all of us as viewers the opportunity to become owners in the project.
Now you have the opportunity to join us in creating even more of the type of content that you want to watch.
The reason why you actually need to experience the behind the scenes of Angel Studios, it's history in the making.
Make the paper, roll the paper.
So this is what learning feels like.
Did you just quote yourself?
I'm Gandhi.
See, I knew those kids could learn. Hey,
This inflation is out of control.
Somebody at my hotel ran up on me and said, hey man, did I see you on TV? I'm like, well, how am I supposed to know?
But I come in the name of the God of Israel.
Yes! Sally, no!
You ran off, I had to leave Lily alone. Lily? Lily?
Car, get up. The black carriage is here.
The Chosen is a smash success. It is the #1 biggest crowdfunded project of all time.
Over 2 seasons, the series has garnered a huge global following.
Dallas, did you have any idea that this would be so wildly successful? Because it sounds like Hollywood did not expect it.
Follow me.